Well, the crypto market has now officially broken out as Bitcoin's price pulls back towards $107,000 at the time of recording. Now, this breakout is something that we have been preparing for and expecting for multiple days now. And I'm going to show you exactly what's happening, what I'm expecting next, and exactly what my plan is going forward. And so, look, we have a good bit to get into today. So let's not waste any more time and let's get into it. So, what you all know is that over the last couple weeks, we have been talking about this ascending structure that Bitcoin had been in. We had been putting in the higher highs, we had been putting in the higher lows. And I told you all, listen, there is an over 90% chance that Bitcoin's price breaks to the downside of this structure. That's not me just saying that. That's not me saying that's what I wanted to happen or thought was going to happen. I'm just telling you what the data says. And the data says there was over 90% chance of breaking to the downside of the structure. And so, as a result of knowing the odds here and knowing that this is a probability, not so much a possibility, what we went ahead and did is we had been taking a good bit of profits off the table for the last couple of weeks. If you go ahead and you actually look at our buy sell bubble sheet, which all of this is documented over in the Crypto Strategy School, you can see here that since April 22nd, and man, even April 20th, we have been taking profits consistently. And if we overlay that with what's been happening, we were just consistently taking profits as Bitcoin's price was in this ascending channel, expecting that this was a short term structure that we're likely going to have to fall down outside of before we can try to continue this move upwards. Now, I've made it clear for you all, it isn't in my thought process that we were just going to see Bitcoin break down this and just, break down out of this and just go all the way down to 60K. No, that's not what I'm thinking was going to happen. What I was just saying though is, listen, Bitcoin, you remember we had this descending channel when we broke out of it? I said, look, Bitcoin's broken out of it. It's created a beautiful uptrend. We had 5 really strong waves upwards. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is not textbook Elliott's wave theory, but it is 5-wave theory, which I think is important. We've had 5 fantastic wave upwards, or you almost can call it 7, but 5 to 7 waves upward. I think that there's a decent sized chance that we pull down out of this. We try to find some sort of higher low, start creating more macro structure to then try to push towards the upside later on. I think there's a very real world where Bitcoin's price pulls back to say 102 or 94K, or maybe even as bad as 86K, but then he uses that support to continue upwards. And so that's what we had been preparing for. That's what we had been planning for. Matter of fact, if we actually go look at the Discord server over in the school, look what I said yesterday at 8:19 in the morning, guys. I said I decided to go ahead and close down another 2% of my entire Bitcoin position in a profit at $109,600. I said my primary reasoning for closing this portion of my position is due to the battle that is currently being had within the ascending structure. Bitcoin is really struggling to break the golden fib zone, and although it's not a guarantee, it just increases the chances of this thing breaking to the downside in less than 24 hours later. That was the high, the local high, and we've now broken to the downside of this ascending structure, completing the breakout that we've been talking about for the last week. And so I know a lot of you are probably tired of hearing about the ascending structure. You're probably tired of hearing about this breakout. Well, listen, the breakout is now here. So let me tell you what comes next. So moving a little bit along, now that we've confirmed that this breakout has happened, we are going to start seeing things called bounce zones come into effect. Okay. And bounce zones are key levels of support that are extremely, extremely high in liquidity that oftentimes can act as a bounce level for the price. In more simpler terms, what we can see is that, listen, Bitcoin's price has been in, again, this ascending structure. And as a result of that, now that it's coming down, there are levels where it's very likely that Bitcoin's going to try to bounce off of them. Hence why we call them bounce zones. Now, the first bounce zone I actually told you about 2 videos ago, and I told you it was right here, right at this bottom side support around 106. Do you guys remember when I told you that if Bitcoin bounces off this support level and we go up, once we break out, this becomes a bounce zone? Well, look what's happening right now. Look at how now that Bitcoin's price has come down and lost that support, we've come right down to where this key level of support previously was, and we're using this as support. This is a bounce zone happening in real time. And there are many bounce zones here for Bitcoin, which is a good thing for the Bitcoin bulls. Because what this means is that there are many levels that give us a very good chance at Bitcoin seeing the higher low and trying to continue back into the bull market and continue this bull market, which I think, again, has a very high possibility here. Not probability, but possibility. So let's talk about where those bounce zones are and exactly how I'm going to play them. So the first bounce zone occurs between 105 and 102,000, $105 and $102,000. Now, The reason why is very simple. You can just look at the liquidity. Look at how we established the support level here. Look at how we had all this resistance here. Look at all this resistance here. We went range bound, a little HMZ action, one would say, in between 106 and 102. Well, guys, this is going to be a massive point of liquidity. This is going to be a key area of support. And I do expect that although it would be hard for Bitcoin to maintain the support and then continue up to like 120, it is possible and it is worth considering being called bounce zone one. Okay. Now the next one is bounce zone two, a little bit further down, and it currently ranges between $97,000 and $93,000. These are probably the more likely levels to hold Bitcoin's price up if I had to guess. I think if Bitcoin's price came down anywhere around 93, I think it's reasonable to say that we could get a beautiful bounce off this. Just from a structural perspective, it looks good, right? It's a pretty big correction, brings the market down, key level of support, previous level of resistance, previous level of support from that previous little HMZ that we had back in December. I think it's reasonable to assume that 93K could operate well. And so because of that, that's going to be bounce zone two. And then bounce zone three, the final bounce zone, is anywhere between $88,000 and $86,600. Okay. Now, there are a couple key reasons as to why this is the last bounce zone, but the primary reason is that one, this is there's two, I guess. One, this is the previous point of resistance, macro resistance that was forcing the price down. So, of course, this is going to be a macro point of support. You're always looking for the RS flip, especially after a pullback of that size. And then, secondly, if we put on our golden Fibonacci zone, you can see here quite clearly that that does indicate the beginning of the golden Fibonacci zone, which is where you would expect to see a lot of liquidity jump in, right? And so those things considered, that's bounce zone three between $88,000 and $86,800. And so these are my three bounce zones. These are the three levels in which I think Bitcoin will try to use to break back up towards the upside and try to push up towards $115,000, $116,000, $117,000. In a great world, right? And I mean, it could be bigger than that, right? Maybe Bitcoin, based on this first bounce zone, goes up to 117. Off the second bounce zone could be as high as 124. The third bounce zone could open up a door to 130, which is pretty cool. So a lot of possible upward momentum there. And so what I'm going to do with this thesis in mind, this thought process in mind, is that I'm going to use these bounce zones as accumulation levels. What I'm going to do is I'm going to buy an increasing size the further into these bounce zones we get. So what I would maybe do is put $2 in at bounce zone one. I'd put $4 in at bounce zone two, and maybe $8 at bounce zone three. And the reason why I would be increasing the size of these positions is because the lower into the bounce zones you get, the more likely it is that you bounce. And so because of that, obviously, knowing that there's a higher likelihood of profitability, of course, it's a good time to increase that position size. Now, the money that I'm going to be reinvesting back in at these bounce zones is going to be the profits that I've been pulling from Bitcoin here. I'm not going to be redeploying any or deploying any new cash into my portfolio. I don't really see a good point in that right now. But considering we did take a ton of profits off the table over the last couple of weeks, I think taking 30, 40, 50% of the profit that was pulled here, reinvesting it back in at these bounce zones would make a ton of sense. It's the exact strategy that we did here. Look. We were taking profits, reinvested, took profits, reinvested, took profits, reinvested. And so I think I'm just going to continue that, using some of the profits that were pulled right up through this move over the last couple of weeks and start deploying that profit in when/if we start to see this bad boy pulling to the downside. Now, what I'm going to be buying into is going to be Bitcoin. Okay, so I am still going to be buying a good bit of Bitcoin, but I am going to be buying a lot more altcoins than I have been previously. And the primary reason as to why I'm going to be buying so many altcoins is simply just due to the fact that Bitcoin dominance is clearly losing strength. What you can see is that Bitcoin dominance had been in this huge ascending structure. I mean, gigantic ascending structure since December of 2024. And it has now broken to the downside of it. It's getting rejected off the golden zone, and it's showing many signs of weakness. Now, listen, Bitcoin's still under control of the market. Don't you get me wrong. But what this tells me is that Bitcoin's strength, grip, grasp over the market is being diminished. And I do expect that we will see altcoins start to do start to perform decently when if we can see this market enter into a bit of a better spot. And so since we are seeing Bitcoin dominance getting rejected, Bitcoin losing strength against alts, and we're starting to enter in some bounce zones, what I'm going to do is use these bounce zones as entry opportunities for my altcoins specifically. These includes things like Solana, SWI, maybe a little ETH, Ondo, XRP, HBAR, XLM, and much more, of which I will talk about extremely soon. And that's my strategy, and that's my play. I think these bounce zones are extremely important. I think one of these is going to have a good chance at bouncing crypto back to the upside. It's not a 100% chance, guys. We might just see Bitcoin fall below 86,000 and just enter into some sort of more macro descending structure. Maybe this is some sort of leaning double top in which we do see the crypto market just go into a bear market from here, right? All of these things are possible, but I don't particularly think that they are for sure likely, right? I'm not really thinking that we're in a position in the crypto market right now where we're just going to go into a bear market. I think there are still many catalysts ahead of us. I think there's liquidity ahead of us. I think there are many reasons as to why crypto could continue in the bull market. And I think one of these bounce zones could easily be the thing, the level, location, whatever, to allow this bull market to continue. So I am going to use these zones to reinvest some of my profit, throw it back into my Bitcoin, into my altcoins, and let this puppy ride. And if you do want to see exactly when I'm reinvesting into, what I'm reinvesting into, and much more, what I want you to do is I want you to hit that link down below and go check out the school. Because in the school is where you can get real-time updates about what I'm doing, what other creators such as Connor Kinney and Aaron Bitter are doing, professional traders, coaches, and much more. We have a huge community there. And listen, if I just go to the community again, look, I want to show you something real quick. Let me share this with you. Look at, I mean, this is just over the last 24 hours. Even when the market's not been great, look at the hundreds of percentages and gains that are being generated by this community. And listen, this is every single day. And so if you're someone who wants to check that out, the link is down below. And if you're a trader, what I want you to do as well is go get that 10% bonus on BTCC. There's no point in not doing it. What you can see here is there's an extra bonus of up to $10,000 per user, which is you, and you can enjoy up to 40% lower trading fees. If you trade and if you know trading, you know how ridiculous that deal is, especially in comparison to many of the other deals on the market. It's not going to last forever, so the link for that is down below. But in the meantime, after you check out the school, go sign up for BTCC. Once you're done with those things, I want you to lay out your bounce zones and start watching this thing closely. Because if Bitcoin at any given point loses $106.9 thousand, which is the first little tiny bounce zone, these are going to come into play. We're going to see bounce zone 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 start coming into play. And that's when we're really going to have to be on our A game trying to locate some of these support levels and start reinvesting some of our cash. Okay. So I'll keep you updated. In the meantime, if Bitcoin's price somehow bounces off 106 all the way back up to like 110, 112, maybe this is a fake out. That would be wild. That almost never happens. There's less than a 10% chance of that happening. But if that happens, don't you worry. I'll be here with you. I'll make a video as soon as possible. But this is where I am. This is what I'm doing. And I hope you guys did, of course, enjoy today's video. If you did, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.